Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be reviewing the Canon 75-300mm f4 to 5.6 version 3 kit lens. This lens receives a lot of slack from a lot of photographers, and I must say I've been guilty myself as well. We underestimate this lens and we accuse it of things that it does not deserve because we forget to take one thing into account, and that is the price. So without further ado, let's get on with this video. So first off, let's just talk about this lens for a bit. It comes in a box like this. Now, I've had this lens for coming on 10 months now, so I still have the box. I always keep the boxes, but this is not new. Now, when you get it out, it comes with little plastic things to keep it safe, and here is the lens itself. So the Canon 75-300 f4 to 5.6 lens is Canon's cheapest lens. And for that, you can't expect too much. There is an average image quality and there is an average range. The lens is averagely built, and altogether, for the money, it's a decent lens. You can't expect more than what you pay for. This is what you get for the price, which is why if you can get it second-hand in good quality for under £100, it's a very good lens, especially for beginners. It also means that if this lens gets damaged or dropped, you're not losing much money. The lens has a zoom range from 75 to 300mm. So this is a telephoto lens, as it can zoom a very long way. It has quite a lot of zoom range. At 75mm it has a minimum aperture of 4, and then at 300 it has a minimum aperture of 5.6, which isn't too bad actually. You can still get quite a bit of separation between the subject and the background. The lens has autofocus and manual focus modes, so you can choose if you want to manual focus it or use the autofocus. The lens is built pretty solidly actually. Now, it is plastic, but it's quite strong plastic and it feels like a proper lens in your hand. Now, there is pretty much no metal on this lens whatsoever except for the lens mount. Now, the lens mount is metal, which is great because that keeps it nice and safe and secure, and it'll last a long time. The lens has rubber around the zoom and focus rings, which make it nice and easy to grip. They're textured very nicely. It has nice bubbles around the zoom wheel, and then it has some ridges around the focus. The lens has a nice small opening. It's nice and compact. It doesn't grow very big. It doesn't get huge or anything. It's a nice, compact, simple barrel, which means it fits in your camera bag very nicely. The end glass piece is 58mm. That is a good size. It means that for the telephoto it's still nice and compact, and it also matches the 18-55 kit lens, meaning you can buy one lens protector for both, or some polarizers for both if you are going to use polarizers on this lens. And the big deal is that it is cheap. This lens is very affordable for all photographers, whether you're a beginner or someone who's going through a bad business time. It goes between £150 to £200 here in the UK. If you get it refurbished or off eBay, you can get it under £100 if you're lucky. So it's a very good price. Now let's talk about the cons of this lens. With this lens, you can see chromatic aberration on extremely bright days. I do lots of wildlife photography, and if you take a photo with this zoomed in all the way on a bird with lots of small branches around, you can see some chromatic aberration. This can be fixed in post, however it is not ideal. This lens does not come with image stabilization. Now, this is a shame, however for the price you cannot expect image stabilization. Canon have come out with a 70-300mm lens, which is more expensive, and this comes with image stabilization. However, if image stabilization was on this lens, the price range would be much higher. Without the image stabilization, if you are zoomed in at 300mm, you may need to use a higher shutter speed to get the image nice and sharp. When zooming, this lens is not very smooth. If you try and zoom in slowly, the lens will stick. You can probably hear it. I'm trying to be as smooth as possible, but it's not very possible to zoom in slowly. However, if you zoom in fast, it's a nice smooth zoom. So no cinematic smooth zooming with this lens. This lens does not come with a lens hood. When you buy it, there is no lens hood with this lens, which means if you want one, you will have to purchase the Canon lens hood or a cheaper alternative. When I was looking, I couldn't find a cheap alternative which had good delivery, so I just got the Canon one. I got this one about 6 months ago and have been using it, and it's a good lens hood. It's nice and strong, it's not going to break unless you're particularly aggressive, and it's a matte finish inside which stops sun reflections. It goes on the end, nice and securely, and it fits very well. So now it's time to test the autofocus on the Canon 75-300 f4 to f5.6 lens. So what we're going to do is we're going to set it up focusing on an object. I'm going to start with bird feeders. I'm then going to put it totally out of focus using the manual mode. Then I'll flick the switch to put it onto automatic focusing, and we will see how quickly it manages to refocus on that object. That'll show us how quick the autofocus is. Then I will compare it to the Canon 18-55. Now this is a lens almost everybody has if you haven't sold it. This lens is pretty good, and so we're going to be comparing the autofocus on this so you can see how quick the Canon 75-300mm lens is at autofocusing. First we're going to do them both at their furthest aperture, so we're going to do the 75-300 at 300mm, and then we'll do the Canon 18-55 at 55mm. Then we will swap them and do the Canon 75-300 at 75 and the Canon 18-55 at 18 to see if that makes a difference on the autofocusing. So here we have the Canon 18-55 and it's focused on the tiger. Let's mess up that focus. And that was quick. That was a second. So we have the 18-55 set up down here, and we're going to be autofocusing on the Canon 75-300mm lens itself. So I hit record. Now let's mess up this focus. There we go, that's as much as we can do. So we've now set up the 75-300, and there is the 18-55 all the way over there. Because it's a telephoto, we have to be quite a long way away. And now let's swap it to manual. Focus it as far out as it will go. And let's see how quick it is. And that was not too bad. And so we have done our tests, and what we can see is the autofocusing on the Canon 75-300mm lens isn't as bad as we thought it was necessarily. So when the lens is extended all the way to 300mm, the autofocusing is relatively slow. We saw that when we tested it. However, when we put it down to 75mm, the autofocus is only slightly slower than it is on the Canon 18-55mm lens. So that is a good note for the autofocus. So it still isn't quick, but at the lower end of the focal range, it isn't as slow as people make out. So let's talk about image quality. The image quality on this lens, I would say, is average. When I first got it, I was surprised, but it was one of my first lenses. Since I've got the Sigma and the Canon 50mm 1.8 prime lens, I have learned that the image quality is average. It's not the best, and it's not that bad. You can get very good photos on here. I spent my first 3 months of photography using this lens and got some incredible photos, which I'll show you now. So what you pay for, the image quality is okay. Now, when doing some tests with this lens, I found out that at 75, the image quality is very good. The image quality is at its best between the 100 and 135mm range. As you get up to 200mm, the image quality is still okay. More than 200mm is when you start to lose quality. So if you're going to buy this lens and you're not using it for wildlife, which is a long way away, potentially if you're using it for sport and you can get closer, then I would advise not going past 200 if you want all of your images to be nice and sharp. The lens doesn't look bad, it looks like a good quality lens. For people who are not photographers, they will see this and think, that's a nice lens you have. It's very neat, it's compact, it has a nice silver ring around it, which is just cosmetic. I don't think there's any reason for it other than that, but it looks nice and tidy. So let's talk about the uses for this lens. It's a telephoto lens, which makes it good for sports, wildlife, astrophotography. It's also quite good for portraits. At 75mm, the lens is relatively sharp, and if you are photographing one person, then you can stand a fair bit away from them and get some nice compression and a good photo. So my opinion about this lens. I like this lens. I'm glad I have it. This came with a starter kit. It came with the 18-55, and then I got this lens as well. It's a good lens. It taught me how to use telephoto, and it made me appreciate the zoom range of almost 4 times. It wasn't too expensive to start out, and it allowed me to get many photos which I wouldn't have been able to get with a smaller lens. Having got more expensive but better lenses now, I realise that the quality and the speed of this lens are not the best, but I still appreciate that for the price it's still very good. So if you're going to take anything away from this review, I would take away that for the price, this lens is as good as it should be. We don't need to start slating the lens for how bad it is, because it is very cheap and it's good for beginners and people who are just looking to have fun with photography. It looks very nice and it's light and easy to use, but you will lose some image quality and there's no stabilization, so you do need to be a bit careful. So I hope you enjoyed this video and learned something. If you did, please hit that like button and subscribe for more reviews just like this. Also, if you want to see me doing photography in the real world, go watch my wildlife walks or any of my vlogs where I use cameras just like this one to take real photos out in the world, mainly of wildlife, but I do some other things as well. If you have any suggestions on any videos you would like to see next, please leave them in the comments below. Thanks for watching.